Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I got the chance to speak to Kyran Daniel today. Fantastic guitar player and performer. I met him the first time back in 2007 when I went to the Chet Atkins convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was probably 19 years old. He was probably 17 years old or something like that, and he was already an artist touring with Emil, and he was doing these great solo guitar shows. He's also a great producer and he's done so many other things, and I'm so excited to share this little interview with you all. So here we go, let's dive into the interview. Hello Kyran, how are you?
Emil, I'm good, how are you doing?
Very good, very good. We're so happy to be able to invite you to this little interview here. For many years now I've known you I heard you back in, I think it was 2006 the first time, which is a long time ago now. And when I first heard you play, Kyran, I was, like all my fingerstyle friends, blown away by your playing. And like I said, we talked a little bit before the interview here, and it's an honor to have you on our little.
That's really kind.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you on the little site here to introduce you to some more fingerstyle guitar players, because I know a lot of people know who you are already, but I know a lot of young students that might not have discovered your playing yet. So it's nice to be able to let them know about your playing as well here. So
that's really sweet, thank you.
Well, so I'm just gonna jump into the interview here. I just wanted to ask you, where did you grow up and how did you get started with music?
Growing up and getting started with music. So I grew up in Melbourne, in Australia, on the outskirts, kind of in the country. No one in my family was a musician, but we had a bunch of guitars around the house. I wanted to be a drummer. I wasn't allowed to play drums, but I was allowed to take a couple of guitar lessons. And I couldn't stand it at first. I actually really hated it until my teacher brought in a Telecaster and played some Stevie Ray Vaughan, and immediately I was hooked. And I asked him to. I got home that evening. This is when I was like 7 or 8 years old. Got home that evening, asked him to record this song into the tape machine on the answering service, and started learning Stevie Ray Vaughan by him playing it onto my tape machine, or my family's tape machine. And from that, I didn't take lessons for very long, but from that point it was like I was hooked, and I would just teach myself things by ear. And then, because we were kind of on the outskirts of the city, there weren't really other musicians to be collaborating with. So just by default, I kind of ended up playing solo acoustic guitar music. Got involved in kind of the blues scene in Melbourne, had a great mentor by the name of Jeff Atchison, and was able to go and support his shows and play some festivals around Melbourne and Australia. And that built to the point where I met Tommy Emmanuel when I was a teenager, and then everything kind of blew open from there and started going overseas, and it all opened up. So that's the very short story of how it started.
That's awesome. You mentioned you wanted to be a drummer, because when I listen to your playing, it's very your guitar playing is very percussive, and you have a great time and feel in your playing, which was when I grew up listening to fingerstyle players. What I was drawn to was the groove and the feel of the music, and there was not it was not a lot of players that had that feel. I mean, there were great players, of course, but you were one of the few who played that fingerstyle in that groovy way. Did you actually work on that in a certain way when you grew up, or just play along with music, or how did you develop your great groove timing?
The groove, I think there's a few answers to that. I think the core reason is it's just what I want to feel. I mean, I think especially when I was younger, the music I listened to was very groove-based music. a lot of neo soul and funk and soul and kind of drum and groove heavy music. And so, that's not normally a feeling that you would get from solo guitar music, but I still wanted to get a degree of that from that. So that's probably why I was trying to get that feeling out of an instrument that didn't naturally give it. The other thing was I think the first time I was in a studio when I was 12 or 13, I remember the recording engineer is like, if you want to improve this, practice continually with a metronome. And so I practiced a lot with a metronome. If I was learning songs, or even if I was writing songs and then having to teach my own composition to myself and get it up to speed, it would always be with a metronome, starting slow and building up, 1 or 2 BPM at a time. So I think a lot of work with a metronome was a huge help. And even over the past 5 or 6 years, doing a lot more pop where everything is on a strict grid, I think that's improved it even further. When I listen back to recordings for myself now, the number one thing that I really need to get perfect is timing. If things differ too much, it really annoys me. So I think it's just because I need that feeling for myself.
That's very interesting, and it's the thing is, even though you have a lot of difficult technique that you've developed over the years, and already I heard that when you were really young, doesn't matter what you play. Really, you still have the time. I feel, and that's what makes this interesting when you're listening to a guitar player, that even though no matter what you're playing, you still have that groove and the feeling and that beat, and that heartbeat going on all the time, which is really special. So, and I remember really some of my viewers in this channel, ProGuitar, might know this, but I went to the Chet Atkins convention in Nashville in 2007, and I was 19 years old. Now I'm 35. How old are you, by the way, Kyran? Are you
33?
33, okay. And you were playing together. I remember you were on tour with Tommy Emmanuel at that time?
At that time, 2007. Yes, I would have been 18 years old on tour with Tommy in the States, yeah.
Yeah. Was that the first time in the States, or had you been there earlier?
I'd been there 2 times prior to the Chet Atkins convention, like doing some solo things there and playing with Tommy a couple of times there. I think that was maybe 2004 and 2005 I went there.
Okay, and what I noticed already at that age, because a lot of us younger kids, fingerstyle people, we were kind of guitar players, getting to become guitar players. But I felt like in your case, you were already an artist at that age in terms of performance and how to be on stage and to catch the audience attention. Did you perform, or how did you get to that point where you felt so comfortable already at that age on stage?
Probably just by doing it. I mean, my personality would probably indicate that I wouldn't be particularly, or not uncomfortable doing it, but my personality would indicate that that is a position that I wouldn't choose to be in. But I think just because it's been where I've been placed since I was maybe 8 years old, it's just automatically become a comfortable place for me. And kind of, I think this is typical of a lot of Australian musicians. Like I've heard Keith Urban and Tommy talk about this, is playing in some of the tough venues and situations in Australia where like audiences aren't really going to sit there and automatically pay attention to you. Like you have to kind of fight for attention to a degree. So especially in the blues scene that I was in Melbourne growing up, I think it was just like a rugged place where you got thrown in, terrible sound, you had to deliver and punch through, and if you didn't, you failed. So you had to make it work. I think that's probably half of where it came from. The second half is Tommy's manager through all those years, Gina Mendello, like she always made the point of saying that, you need to deliver a performance, not just playing guitar. So it was also her advice to make a note of doing that properly as well.
That's great, yeah. And back then, you made this record that I bought from you, and then you signed it, I think, and then you looked at me and said, "Thank you very much." And it felt like I remember that you were very nice and humble, and even though for me, already a star, you know, and that was really nice. I remember that distinctively.
Oh, that's
And,
sweet. Well, I
and
really like if somebody goes to the effort of, spending money on a CD or a ticket or something. Of course, I appreciate it.
yeah, and that CD that you recorded, I now read that that's available for everyone to listen to on streaming services, right?
Yeah, we re-released it. I think it was the 1st of September. We re-released it onto all streaming services. We're also putting the tabs and notation together in a more official release of the tablature and notation, and
Wow.
and then considering maybe re-releasing some other old catalog, and then obviously developing a whole bunch of new songs, hopefully ready for next year as well.
That is awesome. That's great news for fingerstyle players everywhere. After the tour in 2007, when I met you there, what was your next step musically?
Progression from there. So yeah, finished that American tour with Tommy. At the time, I was also in the application process, applying to Berkeley College of Music. I finished that tour, got back to Australia, and then I think it was 2 months later, I was on a flight back to Boston to start studying at Berkeley College of Music. Began classes there. Maybe 6 months later, ended up on another tour with Tommy in Europe. I think we did Switzerland, Germany, Austria. I played a festival in France. Music Messe in Germany for Maton. A couple of other things. Then back to Berkeley for a couple of years. And then I quit music altogether. By the way, at Berkeley, I wasn't really studying guitar so much. I mean, there were classes that I had to do as a guitar player, but my focus was on contemporary writing and production.
You started to go towards the world of producing and recording, right?
Yeah. So behind that was probably this frustration of being a fan of so many different genres of music, and different vocalists and drummers, and just being a fan of music in general and feeling really restricted by only having 6 strings and no voice and no other instrumentation, that I needed to be trying some other things. So so songwriting and production was the focus at Berkeley. I had a great teacher, Pat Patterson, who was the songwriting teacher for Gillian Welsh and John Mayer, who's a really well-known songwriting teacher. A couple of great production teachers, Jetro De Silva, who's done a lot with Ricky Martin. I'm trying to remember who else he worked with. Maybe he worked with Whitney Houston, Jamie Foxx. And yeah, just like the amazing teachers at Berkeley. And so that was my focus. And then at the end of my time at Berkeley, I entirely quit music. I left everything for multiple reasons that I won't necessarily go into right now. And then only came back to music maybe 5 or 6 years later. And my re-entry point was into essentially being a collaborator. So it's kind of this set of writing for people, producing for people, session guitar for people. And at that time I was based out of Melbourne, Australia again. And so I kind of built that collaborative aspect of my career for about 5 years. And now in the past 12 months, I've started to reintegrate the solo acoustic work back into that set. So it's a pretty broad set of work at the moment, and I think it'll continue that way. I like the combination of being able to do the solo, very artistic things, and then, using my other skill sets to work with other artists at the same time.